A large pharmaceutical company, a huge vaccine order, and enormous sums of money. The Pfizer and Poland trial began today in Brussels. At stake is who will pay for the surplus American big pharma products that were not collected during the pandemic, and how much. Today, in the building behind me in Brussels, a trial is beginning. A trial brought against Poland by Pfizer. The case dates back to 2022, when the then Minister of Health, Mr. Niedzielski, decided not to implement the agreement between the European Union, the European Commission and Pfizer. Poland thought everything would blow over, but Pfizer is seeking 6 billion zloty. This huge amount did not come out of nowhere. According to the company, it is the equivalent of the vaccines not collected by Poland. At that time, we had an excess of them, and the then Minister of Health, Adam Niedzielski, refused to accept more, even though Brussels, which negotiated the agreement with Pfizer, was pressurizing EU countries to accept more and more. The Law and Justice government was the first to say that it would not give in to international corporations that wanted to blackmail Poland when it came to the purchase of vaccines. At the time when the decisions were made, everyone acted primarily in the interests of the patient. Let's go back to April 2022 for a moment. The pandemic was still theoretically continuing, but those who wanted to be vaccinated had already had their third dose, and more people were wondering how much of this whole COVID thing was a real threat and how much was big business for big pharma and EU officials. This was especially true after Ursula von der Leyen met the CEO of Pfizer, and private text messages exchanged between the head of the company and the head of the European Commission about the deal were leaked. Ursula von der Leyen's husband is associated with Pfizer, and we also know that the huge vaccine orders placed by the European Union, which also included Poland, are a huge scandal. There was not that much demand. A lot of money was spent, and now the lawsuit against Poland for 6 billion zloty for vaccines that were not actually used only illustrates the direction in which these big pharma companies are going, and how much they are trying to profit from the pandemic on human health, and how enormously interconnected it all is, especially if we take into account the EU elites who function within this system. At that time, in April 2022, Poland refused to accept more vaccines because there were already huge stocks in warehouses, 20 million doses, even though EU pressure was growing. The European Union ordered vaccines on a massive scale. Poland did not need them. Therefore, under the rules of civil law and the rules applicable to normal transactions, it is necessary to defend one's interests and to not succumb to the dictates of international corporations that have shady dealings with people like von der Leyen. Now, someone has to pay dearly for what the EU ordered, and Poland did not accept. 6 billion zloty. Pfizer representatives explained in court that business is business, and even during a pandemic, contracts must be honoured. Poland defends itself with the so-called force majeure, because accepting millions more vaccines only to dispose of them later made no sense. What is surprising in all of this, however, is the silence of the European Commission, especially its president. The matter was negotiated by the European Commission. There is a lot of disturbing information surrounding these negotiations. For example, the personal correspondence between the head of Pfizer and Ursula von der Leyen was exchanged. The matter in general should be dealt with from this perspective by the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which is appointed for this type of situation. But instead of these proceedings, which will protect national budgets from claims that should not exist, we have a shortcut. We have the protection of the European Commission and the expectations of a private company. We have 3 days of trial ahead of us, in which the final verdict is uncertain. But one thing is certain, there is no 600 billion zlotys in the health ministry's budget to settle EU orders. We will become defenseless if we allow decisions to be made in Brussels, not in Warsaw, because Brussels, and especially the demonic European Commission, is not a caring mother but a ruthless trader for whom only profit matters, as demonstrated by the Pfizer case against Poland, which is starting today. If we agree to the trader's dictates, we will pay for the shady deals of Ursula von der Leyen and her entire corrupt entourage. At stake in the dispute with Pfizer, but in reality with Brussels, is not only huge sums of money, but also who bears the consequences of EU decisions.